Everybody, it's your main man, Anthony Brogdon. And let me tell you, I'm talking smoothly because I got a smooth brother on the channel today. Strong Inspirations, where we give it to you straight, no chaser. Let me tell you, I've been admiring this guy for years. And I've been able to because I grew up like 1 or 2 blocks from him. And you know, even when you know how one of your neighborhood guys, you just think he's a regular dude. He ain't regular. This man, let me tell you something, he can't hear me. But I said, man, you know, I've been watching you. He said, man, I didn't see you got 2 awards in the last 3 weeks. He said, no, that's 3 awards. You missed one. They recognizing me. And then he gets so many of them, he said, well, let me tell you. And I know he really means it. I do it not just for the awards. That's the byproduct. I do it because I love doing it, and I love what I'm doing, and it's and educating people in the way that I do it, and you'll hear that way shortly. I'm super excited, man. Boy, I was thinking about this all day long. I might have sent him 3, 4 confirmations, and he hit every time. Yeah, man, I got you, I'm coming. I said, cool. Boy, let me tell you something, Strong Inspirations, we are jamming now. And I can say it in this regard, jamming like Jamaica, because besides all the other things he does, he's a musician playing the reggae-ish type, what it is, calypso type, but that kind of music. And he is the best, his band is the best around this region. I'm so excited to have him on the channel. But let me ask y'all this, y'all, my viewers. Did you see the video I did with that brother Femi Oslin out of Johannesburg, South Africa? He grew up in Lagos, Nigeria. Watch that video, because we are international here at Strong Inspirations. Did you see the one I did with the sister out of Australia? I did not know Australia initially was a continent where most of the inhabitants, let's call it that, were Black people. I did not know that. You hear them terms and so on and so forth. Watch that video. Did you see the one that I did with the lady out of Ireland who said that when the Irish back in the day, they were enslaved, you know, invaded by the Europeans, they were enslaved. And then some of them, you know, they got their freedom. They, you know, didn't hold them long, what have you. A couple of them came to America. One of the guys had the largest plantation, one of the largest in America. He had 500 enslaved folk on his property. Well, my man had a gambling habit, right? And so he decided, I gotta, you know, raise some money. So he sold 250 enslaved Black folks over a 2-day period. Check it out. This is how the gods work. It rained both days. And so that is called Weeping Times. Watch that video. Let me go up just 1 or 2 more. And this is also compared to and I get some of my neighborhood guys, because we got stories. I got a neighborhood guy who's a good friend of mine. His father is considered the first Black to play in the NBA. Watch that video. Oh, we're not playing with you. No, I can't play with you because I'm enjoying this too much. And let me say this, that as I've been doing this, I've become a better person, because I have heightened my appreciation for Black history, but also in particular for Black folk. When you hear what this gentleman is going to tell you today, you will be blown away, because he's good at it. He wins awards for doing it. Not wins, they honor him. And we're going to go into that story. So hit the subscribe button on Strong Inspirations. Hit the like button on this video. I know you're going to like it. He's serious. Hit the notifications bell for when the videos come up. You get a ding, a shock, something to let you know that there is new content on the channel. And then, and I mean this, please, my friends, tell somebody about Strong Inspiration. Don't keep it to yourself. That's not right. You running around here act like you know everything because you sat and watched one of the videos and then don't want to tell nobody where you got it from. Don't do that. That's not good. And I'm adding this to it. Support the people that are on here. I list their websites. Go to them, the museums and stuff. When you're in the area, go visit, donate money, so on and so forth. Now, follow me on Twitter at A Strong Dream, like my Facebook page, Strong Inspirations, and the other one, which is Black History Then and Now. I'm on Twitter and so on and so forth. Also, I use, and I love that word strong a lot. Strong is my favorite word. And I've been saying strong a long time on Strong Inspirations and even prior. In my world, strong stands for strength, tenacity, resilience, and a sense of oneness, nobility, and grace. And that is my introduction to my guest today. He's a strong soul, brother. I'm not playing with you. I'm so happy he's come on the channel. Young man, soul brother, captain of the ship. Come on and tell us your name. I'm thanking for you being here.
What's sounding homie? From
yes,
the neighborhood.
Sir.
This is Malik Yakini. I grew up on Lawton 6 Mile, just a few blocks over from you. I think you and my brother might have been in the same class in elementary school.
That's right.
I think you're closer to my younger brother's age.
That's right.
But I've been seeing you all, ever since. Like
yes,
you say, we
right.
grew up in the neighborhood together. So
that's
it's
right.
a pleasure to be here.
That's right. Hey, thank you for being here. Now, one of the things that I want to start off with, and so I ain't got to go where you from, but I guess your family always was in Detroit. Is that the case?
Well, both of my parents were born in Detroit. My mother's father and mother came to Detroit in the 1920s from Brinkley, Arkansas. Well, actually, my grandfather came from Brinkley. My grandmother came from Biscoe, which is a town about 10 miles down the road. And my father's father and mother came from Southwest Georgia in the 1920s. And my grandfather on my father's side came to work in the Ford Rouge plant.
Okay.
So both my parents were born a couple of years after their parents moved to Detroit from the South.
Now, do you know where the plantation is in your family?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, well, at least on one side of the family, on my mother's side, I've done research going back to my great-grandfather because I was very interested in my great-grandfather, Sandy Odom. And he was born on a plantation in northern Mississippi. And I found this out because I went to Memphis where they have the Benjamin Hooks Library. And in that library, they have what they call the slave schedules for Mississippi, Tennessee, and Arkansas. So, before 1870, Black people didn't appear in the US Census. So if you're going back beyond that, you have to look at what's called slave schedules. And so my maternal great-grandfather was born on a plantation. I forgot the exact name of the town, but it was in northern Mississippi.
What was the schedule? What was that? Like a tax roll, do you think, or what was that? Maybe?
Well, at that point, Black people were considered property by the U.S. government, and so it was a listing of these human beings that were supposedly owned by plantation owners, and they would list them usually often by name, but sometimes also by description and sometimes by age.
Oh, when you saw that, you saw the name, and did it track from his name to who his kids were and offspring, and you were able to back it that way, maybe?
Yeah, exactly. So I was able to track it from there, and then I was able to track him to first he wound up in a place called and the name of it was escaping me, forgive me, but it's in Arkansas, just a few miles west of Memphis, across the Mississippi River. And in that particular county, and again, forgive me for not remembering the name of it right off the top of my head, but Black people had achieved a lot of political power. So they had taken over a lot of the key seats in that town. And in the late 1880s, and also my great-grandfather had been in the Arkansas state legislature. He'd been elected, the same one who was born in slavery on a plantation. By the early 1880s, he'd been elected to the state legislature in Arkansas.
During Reconstruction, I would suspect,
Yeah, exactly. Well, slightly after Reconstruction, actually.
Oh, really?
what happened is after he had gotten out of politics, he was a farmer and he also worked at a newspaper. But the white people in that particular town rounded up all the black leadership at gunpoint and ran them out of town so that they could take the town over. And my great grandfather was one of those who they ran off at gunpoint. And a contemporary publication called the American Missionary actually wrote about it and mentioned my grandfather by name and mentioned the fact that he refused to leave his farm when they tried to get him to leave. Well, I said, not tried to get him, they were terrorizing him, you know.
Yeah.
But then eventually, after some days, he decided to save his life and the life of his children to leave. And so he gave up the farm, you know, he didn't get compensated for it. And then he reappears in the historical record in Brinkley, Arkansas, which is maybe, you know, another 40 miles down the road. And while he was in Brinkley, he established a school. And that's really why I first became interested in him, because before I did the work I'm doing now, I had established a school.
Yeah, that's right.
So I realized there was something about my great grandfather that I had to understand in order to understand myself. So I started.
It's funny. It's funny you say that, because I have a guy on the channel who says he's an architect because he knew his, and not because, but it came down through the bloodline that one of his ancestors was in carpentry. Maybe that educational component is kind of how it fed into you.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. That maybe there was something in my genes where I thought this was an idea of my own volition. And here I found out I'm genetically compelled to do this. And so we can't fully understand ourselves without understanding our ancestors, frankly.
I love it. How about this one? Now, for you to have found that information.
By the way, Marion, Arkansas is the name of that town that my grandfather was run out of. Marion, Arkansas in Crittenden County. And this occurred in 1888.
Oh, I love it. Let me ask you this. When you saw that, what did that do for you to know that?
Well, let me give you a little background and say this, that I heard these stories in my family. That first I heard that, you know, my great grandfather had built this school in Brinkley, Arkansas. And then I heard that there was a statue for him in the middle of the town. And so when I finally got down there, and I visited maybe in about I think that was about 2007 or so. I found out that was a lot of that had been blown up. So there was no statue of him in the town. There was a cornerstone that had been preserved near the general store. That was a cornerstone for the school that he helped to put together. So that part was true, but the family kind of blown it up about the statue and all of that. And so I wanted to find out for real what the real deal was. So I came with this big view, and then I got the more realistic view, which is that he had started a school, and I was inspired by that. But then when I started digging deeper and found out about him being run out of town at gunpoint, it inspired me because it again helped me know that this rebellious spirit that I have and this, you know, refusal to bow down is something that's in my genetic structure.
I love it.
Yeah.
When you see those documents, like you said, you saw when you see his name, do you say "dang"? Or what's your reaction? Because I've never done that. I always wondered how that works.
Well, you know, what happens when you're studying genealogy? You got pieces, and you start piecing them together. And so it's not necessarily a big aha moment. It's more when you start connecting this with this, you be like, oh, it's all making sense now. So you start to start to develop a narrative. So
let me ask you this. So now as your folks move to Detroit, they move here collectively? Is it like one come at a time and then the others kind of follow, that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened on both sides of my family. My grandfather on my father's side came first, and then my grandmother came, and then several other people from the same town in Georgia came also. And so, you know, and they were all living within close proximity. And the same thing on my mother's side of the family, you know, first my grandfather and grandmother came, and then my grandmother's two sisters also came up.
Yeah.
So in fact, interestingly, growing up, my grandmother and grandfather stayed on West Warren at the corner of Mayberry Grand. And so when I was a child, the same grandfather that moved from Arkansas. When I was a child, he had a printing shop called Odom's Printing. And they owned a duplex. They lived on one side, had a tenant on the other side. And the printing shop was really under the house. It was in the basement of the house, but it had a separate door and a sign and all that. It was a legitimate business.
Yeah.
And so, but right around the corner, they lived on the corner. Then right around the corner was another duplex where my mother's brother and his wife lived. And on the other side of the duplex, my grandmother's sister and her husband lived. So the whole corner was like the family. It was like a little village.
I love it.
So I grew up in that situation.
You know, because a lot of times I hear that people from different parts of the country, and when I'm talking about southern parts, they all kind of migrated to the same cities in many respects.
That's true. A lot of people from Louisiana, for example, moved to California, for example, Oakland, California. Like Huey P. Newton's family is from Louisiana. A lot of people from Louisiana and Texas moved to the West. A lot of people from Mississippi moved to Chicago. A lot of people from South Carolina moved to New York City. And a lot of times they were following those highways that would, you know, like you heard the term 40 going north.
Right.
You know, people were following those highways, and you're right, people from different cities would congregate not only in the same city, but often in the same neighborhood and often in the same house when they first got there.
Yeah, that's right.
Until people could get on their feet.
That's right. So where did let me ask you this. You said they told them stories. Were y'all like sitting around the dinner table, or were you inquisitive to say, hey, I got something to ask you about who you are? How did many times that come up?
Not so much sitting around the dinner table, more so just in conversations with aunts and uncles and sitting around the living room, or maybe after Thanksgiving dinner, that kind of situation.
Yeah. But you were inquisitive to even ask the questions, though, maybe.
Well, but they were giving me information without me asking. Then once I found out a little bit, then I started becoming interested in asking more questions.
Is this what led you to like, for a lack of a better term, Black history like you do?
No, it's not actually. Interesting. So what led me to really study and embrace Black history was going to Post junior high school. Did you go to Post?
No, I didn't. I went to Halle.
Okay. So when I went to Halle, it was only up to, I think we went up to 7th grade.
Okay.
Then we went to Post junior high school for 8th and 9th grade.
Right.
So I started attending Post in January of 1969. And I had 2 teachers at Post that really changed my life. One was named Ronald McCombs, and the other was named Melvin Peters. And they both were childhood friends from West Virginia who had moved up here together and were teaching at the same school. So Ronald McCombs was my social studies teacher. Melvin Peters was my English teacher in the 8th grade. They would often combine their classes together. So on one occasion, they combined them together and they played Malcolm X's record, Message to the Grassroots. And I can really point to that as being the turning point where I started to really understand more about the situation of Black people in this country. It started to become conscious of myself as a Black person. But the other thing in that record that it did is that Malcolm X talked about the diet of African Americans. And let me say that prior to hearing that record in 1969, my very favorite food in the whole world was chitlins. And my mother would only make them once a year on New Year's Day. And they stunk so bad when she was cooking them that she would make them on a little stove in the basement. But I love chitlins. And so in that record, Malcolm X was talking about the fact that during the time our ancestors were enslaved, they would eat the cast off parts of the hog.
That's right.
The snoot, the snout, the hoof, the tail, and what he called the guts. And he said in that record, he says, that's what you were back then, a gut eater. And he says, some of y'all are still gut eaters. And so to my 13-year-old mind, this was like shocking to hear Malcolm X say this. And so I stopped eating chitlins. And that was my first step towards improving my diet and becoming aware of the food, the role that food plays in health. So at this point, I'm a vegan. I've come a long way since then.
Yeah.
That was the turning point. The last thing I want to say is a few weeks after they played that Malcolm X record, they joined the classes together again. and they played a record by Jimi Hendrix called The Band of Gypsies. And I had never heard anybody play a guitar like that. And as you mentioned, I play guitar now, and you can see the guitars behind me.
That's right.
I play guitar because of hearing that record in that 8th grade class. So between January and March of 1969, things happened that changed the trajectory of the rest of my life. And so I owe the fact that I'm immersed in Black history to that experience, the fact that I had changed my diet, I'm a vegan, I owe to that experience, and the fact that I play guitar. All of that came out of those extraordinary teachers at Post.
I love it. I love it. So let's go into it. When you say you love Black history, what does that mean? You love researching, you love talking about it. What does that mean?
Well, let me be clear. What I love is freedom. I love the dream of Black people being free, because we certainly aren't there yet. And so because of my desire for us to be free and to control our own destiny, I started studying our history, because you can't forge the future unless you understand the present, and you can't understand the present unless you understand the historical factors that shape the present. And you also can't understand, as we're thinking about how to move Black people forward, we need to know what's been tried in the past and what was successful and what was not successful.
Okay.
So my study of Black history is not just because I'm enchanted with history, it's because I want to be free. And for me, history becomes a tool of understanding more about the Black experience, so we can understand more about what we need to do to be free and self-determining.
I love it. One of the things that I've had come to conclude is, and so many of the interviews that I've done, like for example, the interview I've done out of a guy talking about the Selma to Montgomery March, is how protests set the stage. And I'm sure, I don't know, I could put no percentage on it, but I would think all the time a protest did move the needle some.
Well, yes. So, people like to say things like, for example, after George Floyd was killed and Black people took to the streets of some cities and were throwing Molotov cocktails and rebelling, a lot of people say, oh, that's Negroes acting crazy. That doesn't accomplish anything. Well, the reality is it does accomplish something. And if you look at our history, almost every time that we have rebelled in some way, the system gives some concessions.
That's right.
So, and that is true with protest also. In fact, Frederick Douglass said that power concedes nothing without I'm paraphrasing, without a
without
struggle.
a fight.
I forgot the exact word, but
yep.
And so, but every time you challenge the system, you get some concession. I find it might be a small concession, but every time you push, you get something. And we need to be pushing more than we're pushing now.
Is there a story that you come to, like a go-to story, where people might not know of the fight that happened that pushed the needle? Is there one of those that come to mind?
There's a lot of stories, and there's stories right here in Detroit. So I'm trying not to think too broadly. I'm trying to think.
You can go however you want to, but whatever. Yeah.
So I'll say this, that in 1989, I think it was, 1990, Black students at Wayne State University took over one of the buildings and occupied it for several days. And as a result of that, were able to pressure the university for a more robust African-American studies program. And so a lot of people don't know about that. And that's one of several takeovers that have happened at Wayne State University. In the 1960s, Chokwe Lumumba and others were involved in protests at Wayne State University that opened up the doors of the law school for Black students to get in. So, I mean, there's many struggles right here in the city of Detroit.
Oh, sure.
Black people have been involved in that open up doors. But whenever we push, we always get something. If we sit back, we're not getting nothing.
When we talk about it, if you could just kind of imagine, let's say living in the 50s or 40s, what would have been your tactic, if you would have had one to push?
It's hard for me to say that, and I hear people say all the time, they might watch movies about slavery and they'll say, if I was back then, they wouldn't have done me like that. I would.
Yeah, that's right.
That. No, you wouldn't have. And so I don't want to, be arrogant and say what I would have done in the 40s and 50s, because I would have had to lived in that time period, and however that affected my view of the world. I can't really say.
Yeah.
But I mean, I would hope that as I am now, I would be involved in resisting oppression and trying to build self-determination for Black people. I would hope, but I can't really say what I would have been doing it. Well,
Okay,
I can say
let's
what I
do
was
this
doing
one.
it. I was alive in the 50s, you know that. I was
Yeah,
born
yeah,
in,
yeah, yeah.
but
Let's do this one. You talked about your grandfather resisting them taking over his farm.
yes.
But then after the resistance, did something happen where he was able to go back, maybe,
Oh,
or
no. He was
is there a positive outcome for him saying no, I can't take this, or whatever? Do you know?
excuse me, the positive outcome is that he didn't get killed, but he
Right,
lost his land, and I'm not sure what he paid for that land.
right.
It's not like they compensated him for it. They just ran him off the land at gunpoint. Even though he resisted, eventually he had to leave. And so the only good point is he maintained his life and the life of his family,
Right.
and then with nothing, ended up in Brinkley and somehow built a school from there.
That's
It's
my point.
miraculous.
Yeah. Um, when you look at the Black history and the education, what would you tell a young person today to help them understand how they should understand and research their history, but also use that to make them a better person to fight for more freedom?
I would recommend first they read the autobiography of Malcolm X,
Okay.
because most of our people are not really conscious. We just live in life. We're not conscious of our situation, how we got this way. And that's how Malcolm X was. But then as he began to grow in the knowledge of self, he transformed himself. And so that's a good guidebook for people
I
trying to
got
bring
you.
themselves from the dead level with no consciousness of self into a more awakened state. And so I would recommend that as the first thing that people do, read that book and really digest it. But then there's so many other examples, to do a deep dig into Black history and find, and particularly those freedom fighters who struggle for our freedom, to really get a profound understanding of that. But what's most important is not looking back. What's most important is going forward. And so we
Right,
look back in order to go forward. The
right.
concept the Ghanaian people call Sankofa. What's important is that we be future focused, but we use the history to guide us as we're shaping the future. So we don't want to be focused on the past. We want to focus on building a future where we're in control of our own lives.
So now all this has kind of led you into where you are today. You had this, you did the educational component, but now you do what?
So right now I had an organization, a nonprofit organization called the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network. And right now we do three main things. We operate a farm, a 7-acre farm in Rouge Park called D-Town Farm, which you've been out there. In fact, you shot some footage out there.
Yeah.
And we grow more than 36 different fruits, vegetables, and herbs each year. We train people how to do urban farming. And we're doing this because we think it's really important for all people, but for Black people in particular in this society, to learn how to feed ourselves, to learn how to provide for ourselves and not put ourselves in a position where we're dependent upon people who often hate us. Some of them hate us or see us only as customers to extract wealth from. And so we find ourselves in a pathetic position where the very people who are oppressing us are the ones feeding us, and we're dependent upon them to feed us. So one of my teachers told me once that children and pets are fed, men and women feed themselves. And so we're teaching Black people how to grow our own food so that we can be more self-reliant and more self-sufficient. The second thing that we do is we have a youth program called the Food Warriors Youth Development Program that operates at three sites in Detroit. The Barack Obama Leadership Academy on the east side of Detroit, which used to be called Timbuktu Academy, the Shrine of the Black Madonna on Linwood and Hogarth, and McDowell Elementary School on Outer Drive near Myers. And so at those programs, we teach young people how to build raised bed gardens, how to maintain those gardens, how to harvest the food, and how to prepare it in healthy ways. And then we also teach them food justice concepts. We want them to understand why the food situation in their community is different than the food situation if you go across 8 Mile to some of the mostly white suburbs surrounding Detroit. And then everything we do from an African-centered perspective. We're always going to be teaching our young people about our history and culture so that they can situate themselves within their own cultural and historical continuum. So we teach them things like about the great contributions that George Washington Carver in this country made to organic agriculture. And we teach them about things like the yam festivals in Ghana. And so they're learning about our culture at the same time they're learning about food. Then the third thing and the biggest thing we're doing now is construction has started on a building that we're developing on the southeast corner of Woodward and Euclid called the Detroit Food Commons. And so we have partnered with Develop Detroit Incorporated to build a new 31,000 square foot, 2-story building that will be the anchor of which will be the Detroit People's Food Co-op, a cooperatively owned grocery store that will be owned by community members. And you can join that by going to the website and paying $200. You have to be a Michigan resident to join, for those who might be watching in other parts of the country, other parts of the world.
Sure.
But if you are not in Detroit, many cities have food co-ops, and I would suggest that folks check out food co-ops that might exist where they are if they're outside of Detroit. So those are the main things that we're doing right now.
Now, when we talk about healthy foods, let me go back a little bit. Is eating pig unhealthy?
You know, that's not for me to say. Different people have different opinion, and of course, I think it would be fair to say most Black people eat pork, and I'm not on some mission to.
Yeah, but I mean, is there something to eating pig?
I'll just say this: that
I stopped too.
There's a couple of reasons that I would suggest that it's not the best thing to eat. But again, I'm not the food police.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah.
So one is the trichinosis worm that is often in pork, and especially if you don't cook it at a very high temperature, it's possible to ingest those worms and have them in your body.
Okay.
The second thing is that in part because of the way pork is cured with a lot of salt, that it is a major contributor to high blood pressure and heart condition, which is one of the things that plagues Black people and shortens our quality and our quantity of life.
Okay.
And so, again, you know, I'm not here to tell people.
I'm not. Yeah, you're just putting it out there. Yeah.
I'm personally vegan, and people ask me about veganism, I tell them, but I'm not on a mission to convert people to veganism.
Right.
While I think health is important, I think, or I don't want to say what's more important, but what's equally as important, rather than badgering Black people over what we eat, is how do we get out of this oppressive system where other people control all the food in our community? If you go eat pork, you should at least own the store that you buy it from.
If you go
eat pork, a Black farmer should have grown it. And you know, how do we not just be victims and be money bags for other people to come in our community and extract all the wealth? That's what I'm more concerned about, whatever people eat.
Yeah, I got you. I like that. We're gonna get back to that, but I wanna go back because you eat healthy. Let's stay on that healthy eating.
Okay. All right.
How about chicken? Is there something in chicken that might not be healthy per se?
Well, let me say this: in the United States, most chickens, first of all, most poultry in the United States is raised by about 4 companies. It's almost a monopoly that these 4 companies control almost all the chicken in the United States. And they raise them in what's called CAFOs, or confined animal feeding operations, where the average chicken has about 14 inches. Their feet never even touch the ground. They're in cages all of their life, usually. And then they feed them with feed that has chemicals in it in order to get them to grow faster than the normal rate.
Yeah, I got you.
So sometimes because of those chemicals, the animals are growing so large, their legs can't even support them. And also because they're all confined in these small spaces, if a disease starts, it runs rapidly through all of the birds. So you might have heard in recent weeks about millions of chickens being killed because of bird flu. And the reason that happens is because you got all of these animals combined in a small space, and disease spreads rapidly. So those are some of the things people should consider.
Yes.
If people eat chicken, I would highly recommend that they eat either Amish chicken or some chicken that is like free range. It's allowed to just be outside and eat bugs and do what chickens do, as
Okay.
opposed to being confined in a cage inside a capo.
Let's see. Let's go back a little bit on this one then, if you might know this from a Black history perspective. What was the diets of those back in those days? Well, I mean, because if they grew their own crops, they were able to eat. What's good to grow to eat? How about that?
But there's lots of things that are good to grow. And also, I'm glad you pointed that out, because the chickens that our great grandparents ate 100 years ago are not the same as the chickens that we're eating now. Those chickens were much healthier because they were free of all those artificial chemicals, all those pesticides, all those antibiotics that they shoot chickens up with. They
Right.
didn't have all of that. And the same thing with the vegetables that we're eating now. 100 years ago, the vegetables were much more nutrient dense because the soil was in better shape. Soil is the basis for healthy fruits and vegetables. And so
Okay.
what has happened in American society, because of the industrial style of farming, where they use a lot of big tillers, and it tills up the topsoil, a lot of that topsoil ends up blowing away. It's subject to erosion. You probably heard of the Dust Bowl in the
Yeah.
1930s. This was caused by this style of farming that's been promoted in the United States, where it's large scale farming, uses big equipment, you have to have lots of water. And so that style of farming has ruined much of the topsoil. And so even if you're eating a tomato, that tomato is not going to have the same nutrients in it that a tomato had 100 years ago. So part of the work of farmers like myself, who are regenerative farmers, is that we're trying to regenerate the health of the soil. We use techniques that build the soil rather than deplete it. You can think about it like this. If you go to your refrigerator every night for a snack, and you go in there and you pull out an apple, let's say, and you got a bag of apples, and then eventually one night you go there and that bag is gonna be empty. And so it's the same thing with the soil. The plants are like pulling nutrients from that refrigerator. And if you don't replenish the nutrients, then one day they come and the nutrients aren't there. And so you might grow a tomato, but again, it's not as good for you because the soil has been depleted. And so that's one of the problems with agriculture in this country. So when we think about what our ancestors ate, though the quality of that food was actually much better, even though they ate lots of pork and they ate chicken. Well, they ate some pork and they ate some chicken. Let me say that, because because that was not necessarily the main part of the meal. You know, the way we see meat now, it's usually, people want a big chunk of meat on the plate, and then they have maybe some peas just to make it look nice, to serve as the garnish.
Sure.
But in most of human history, although human beings have eaten meat, the meat is not the main thing. There might be vegetables and grains, and there might be a small piece of meat.
Is that right?
Because meat is seen as a luxury. In fact, in a lot of developing countries, as their economies are becoming better and people are becoming more affluent, they're moving towards a more Western diet, which is a more meat-centric diet. And then they're starting to see the same diseases that we're seeing in the United States. So there's some class notions also associated with meat eating. People feel like if you can eat lots of meat, that you're in pretty good shape economically. But eating lots of meat has a very detrimental effect on our lives.
Let's go a little bit beyond that. And on this note, when we go back to Africa, let's say, what were some of those diets that you could that you know of that were very nutritious and healthy, that maybe different parts of the continent specialized in than others? Because like I've never really heard of Yukon. I think it's one of them, or some of the others.
So let me start by saying Africa is a very large continent.
Yeah, sure.
54 countries. And in just Nigeria, you have 500 languages just in that one country. And so there's thousands of traditions in Africa, and there's thousands of different dietary regimens. So I just want to acknowledge that.
Sure.
But I'll talk about West Africa. which is what I'm most familiar with. I've been to West Africa about 5 times and have studied some things about the food systems there. And what I've experienced is that most meals, first of all, have a grain. Let's take Senegal, for example. The national dish in Senegal is called cheboujeen. And cheboujeen means rice and fish. And so it's a rice dish with vegetables in it and with fish. And so that is eaten almost every day in Senegal for the evening meal.
It's not that white rice either. It's another flavored rice, I'm sure.
Well, actually, unfortunately, it is right. It is usually white rice. And even worse, it's usually white rice that they've imported from Asia. So a lot of people don't know that there are indigenous strains of rice that have been growing in Africa for some time. And there's a book out called Black Rice by a woman named Judith Carney that documents this and documents, in fact, how that rice came over to the Western Hemisphere. But unfortunately, because Black people in Africa suffer from the same mental damage that we suffer from, they find themselves dependent also. And so much of the rice that they're eating, almost all of it, is being imported into the country. And even worse than that, they get the worst rice, which is called broken rice. Rice that's been, where the kernels have been broken in half unintentionally. And so the most valuable rice is the rice that's in the whole kernels, but in the milling process, some of it sometimes gets broken, and that's kind of like seconds. And that's what they end up selling to West African countries, is broken rice. But in addition to rice, people also eat a lot of millet. That's another grain that's eaten frequently in West Africa, in Senegal, for example. In Gambia, they eat a lot of couscous, which is made from millet, or at least in Senegal and Gambia, it's made from millet. In other countries, it's made from other types of grains. But they'll have that along with some vegetables also, and there might be some meat in the pot. But again, the meat is not the main thing. It's the grain and the vegetables that are the main thing. Same thing in East Africa. They have a dish in Kenya they call ugali, which is made out of corn. And it's something similar to what we might think of as grits, like a thick kind of grit that they then eat with a sauce or a soup. And that sauce or soup might have some meat in it. But again, the meat is not the main thing. It's usually the grains and the vegetables that are the main things.
When, as you are a vegan, let's say this: what is our green vegetables? That should be primary almost in every meal, per se.
I don't know about every meal, but yeah, on a daily, you should be definitely taking in some green vegetables. Definitely.
That's when we talk about green vegetables, we talk about greens, vegetables. I mean, green beans, turnips, what have you, cabbage, maybe like that.
Yeah, cabbage, kale, spinach, lettuces. There's all kind of green leafy vegetables, and one of the things we want from those vegetables is the chlorophyll. This miraculous process where the sun interacts with plants, and the chlorophyll is rich in nutrients and feeds the plant. And the chlorophyll has an affinity, it has a similar structure to our blood. And so that's part of what we get from the plants, but also we get all kinds of minerals and vitamins from those green leafy vegetables. Often green leafy vegetables like kale and collards and spinach are very high in iron. And so they're also high in calcium. In fact, you can get more calcium from from eating a bowl of kale than you can get from drinking a cup of milk. And so there's all kind of benefits to eating green leafy vegetables.
Let me ask you this: as we kind of almost come to a close, what would be an ideal meal, let's say for yourself, that you might eat the most of, that's the healthiest for you, all the nutrients, so on and so forth. And let's add this component that you can grow.
So I do grow a lot of the food that I consume, and I eat lots and lots of kale. I eat kale almost every day, to tell you the truth. It's become my favorite vegetable. So I might have as I'm contemplating, for example, what to make tonight, I'll probably make a pot of rice. I'll probably make some.
Hold on, let me start. What kind of rice?
Brown rice.
Brown, not white rice, brown rice.
Brown rice. So, and the difference in brown rice is brown rice still has what's called the hull on it. So white rice, they've taken the hull off and bleached it, right, to make it white. But when we eat brown rice, we're eating the whole grain meaning the hull on the outside of it, and also the germ is still intact. The germ is the part of the grain that's alive. You might have heard of wheat germ, that take that out of the wheat and they sell it separately. But the germ is the part on a grain that if you wet it, you let it sit in water for a couple of days, it's going to sprout. And because the life force is inside that germ. And so with a lot of grains, what they do is they take the germ out, they took the hull off and they bleach it. And so what we recommend people eat is whole grains, such as whole wheat or brown rice. So anyway, tonight I may make some brown rice, some kale, and I think tonight I'm going to make this stuff called seitan. Seitan is made out of wheat, and it kind of looks and tastes like beef a bit. And I might make some gravy, because I grew up eating meat, and so I still got those memories of what that tastes like, what that gravy is like, and gravy over mashed potatoes and gravy over rice. So I might make some gravy also, and I might make a salad. And so for me, that would be an ideal meal. I have my grains, I have my protein, I have my green leafy vegetables, all the vitamins and minerals I need.
What about fish?
So I don't personally eat fish. I haven't eaten fish in many years, but there's generally fish is better than most meats generally. But the problem is now a lot of the fish that we're consuming is raised on farms, fish farms, and often they're feeding these fish, grains and they have chemicals in them also to induce greater growth. And we have to be very careful about that. But also we're finding that the oceans are being polluted. And, we have this problem of microplastics, for example, where, there's plastic particles now everywhere in the atmosphere, in the water, in the earth. And so these are in fish as well. And so oftentimes when we eat that, we're getting a dose of those things. But what usually happens is that toxic chemicals tend to accumulate in the fat cells of animals. And so if you eat animals that are leaner, then you'll have less chance of getting those toxic chemicals than if you eat animals that have lots and lots of fat. But there's significant problems with all animal foods in American society, unless you make sure that you're buying something that's organic or that is free range, or that was raised in a way that animal is not full of chemicals.
What does organic mean?
So I'll say the layperson's definition is organic means that it was raised without the use of chemical pesticides or chemical fertilizers.
Okay.
And so a pesticide is a substance that you use to kill pests like insects. And so in industrial agriculture that supplies most of our food, they spray lots of chemicals on it to kill the pest. And so when you go to the store and you buy a head of lettuce, you don't see any bites on it from insects because they sprayed it with stuff to kill all the insects and keep them off the plant. Whereas if you go buy some organic produce, you might see some insect bites in it because it's not sprayed with that. So pesticides kill insects and the fertilizers put nutrients in the soil. So what industrial agriculture has done, because they plant in a way that takes all the nutrients out of the soil, they then produce it in a factory and produce it in a chemical way and put that inorganic fertilizer into the soil. And so that's a problem also, because if you put inorganic chemicals in the soil, when it rains, those chemicals leach into the groundwater, and that groundwater empties into rivers and streams, and those rivers and streams empty into lakes and gulfs. And so we have in the United States 120 dead zones where no aquatic life can survive, basically because of the runoff from agriculture.
Oh, I guess last question. Shucks, I had one for you. What about okay, I live in an urban city. I got a backyard, not a lot of land, just a little small backyard. You know how the house we grew up in, that kind of thing. What would be the ideal things that I should grow?
Well, I always recommend people start with things that are easy and you'll be successful with. So collard greens would be number one on that list. You almost can't go wrong. You put them in the ground and put some water on them, they usually do pretty good and they're pretty hardy and resilient. Green beans are easy to grow. I would recommend those. And also grow things you want to eat too. It doesn't make sense to grow stuff that you don't eat. So these are things that Black people commonly eat. Tomatoes are pretty easy to grow. I would recommend people do those. And also potatoes are easy to grow. You can take, in fact, potatoes out of your kitchen, wait till they start growing some eyes in them. And you have to make sure the soil is loose where you're going to plant them because they need to be able to spread out. But if you take a kitchen potato with eyes on it and plant it, it's going to produce 6 or 8 potatoes. And you can dig those out of the ground and you can save them, especially if you have a cellar, you can save them for several months. And so those are some of the things I would recommend people grow that are easy and that people are usually very successful with.
Man, I truly appreciate you enlightening me, because everybody, I gave up pork last year, and this year I gave up beef. So I'm on my way, trying to eat more green stuff, but I still eat the chicken. And it's funny, I've got some chicken where I can see the blood in it. You know how you see the, on the edge and stuff like that, and it look nasty. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking I'm eating blood.
Well, I often say that if people are going to eat meat, I think people should have the experience of killing their own meat, because I don't think most meat eaters really connect the life of that animal with the carcass they're putting in their body. We psychologically separate ourselves from that.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Like first time I went to Africa, I went to Ghana in 1995, and I went to the market with some people who bought a goat, and they tied the goat's legs up, tied the forelegs up, and put it in the trunk of the car. And on the way back to the house, the goat was crying like a human baby. And then we got back to the house, and some guys were there sharpening the knife. They said a prayer, cut it, drained the blood out into a bowl, and they ended up putting that blood in the soup they were making, by the way, that day.
Oh my God.
But, they had that firsthand experience, seeing the life leave that animal. And also they said a prayer because they realized the life force in that animal was now being transferred to them. And so I think people who eat meat need to kill their own meat so they can really realize what's going on.
Yeah. Give us the website for your organization, and so how people can follow you and that kind of thing.
Okay, if people are interested in more information about the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network, they can contact us at www.dbcfsn.org. Again, that's dbcfsn.org. We're also on Facebook, the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network. We're on Twitter, and I think we're on Twitter as D-Town Farm, or you can Google us. We're all over the place.
Yeah. Let me ask one more question. I'm sure that there are organizations across America. What are some of the organizations that people promote what you promote, type thing that you might be involved in?
The main one I would suggest people to check out is one that I'm a co-founder of, and it's called the National Black Food and Justice Alliance. And it's an alliance of about 40 organizations, Black organizations throughout the country who are doing work similar to what we're doing in Detroit. They're either doing farming, building food co-ops, working on food policy, running farmers markets, or things like that. So we have this strong alliance of 40 organizations that are mostly on the East Coast, the South, and the Midwest. We have a few members on the West Coast, but we're not as thick on the West Coast as we are in the rest of the country. But it's a very powerful organization. People can go to that website, which is www.blackfoodjustice.org. Again, for the National Black Food and Justice Alliance, www.blackfoodjustice.org.
And on there might be a way that I can find in whatever city I am where I can support and buy from food co-ops and that kind of thing.
Yeah, there's actually a map that's still in development on the website, a Black food map that has several Black farms throughout the country listed, and some Black food co-ops. So I would suggest people check that out, check that map out on the website.
Okay. Hey, everybody, I told you he was going to put it on you. I told you I was, man, shoot, I told you. And so, he's that kind of conscious kind of guy. And he said, hey, I ain't trying to tell you don't eat the stuff. I'm just trying to tell you what you're eating. And you make your own decision. It's up to you. You know, it's like somebody said, you know, Lord, this, and you say, okay, man, I could take some of that, but nah, he's saying, hey, I'm gonna just tell you what it is, and what you got me on is what really, he said they put the blood in the soup. Unbelievable. Everybody hit the subscribe button on Strong Inspirations. Hit the like button on this video, because see what's happening is, everybody, I got to tell you, and I'm going to let him go over it shortly, is that I want to kind of go in. We're going to always have some Black history perspective, but I want you to know about being healthy too. And that's what this was. So you know something about being healthy, so that you can read some Black history. How about that, everybody? So hit the subscribe button, hit the like button on this video, hit the notifications bell, tell somebody about Strong Inspirations. I forgot to do one thing at the beginning. I was so excited to have him on. Everybody read my book. It's called Black Business Book on the Rise of Black Business in America. It's available on my website, businessintheblack.net. Everybody, I want to say this to him, and I mean this with all sincerity, my brother, from way deep down, from way back in the day, is that I want you to stay strong, stay safe, stay on your grind. I love what you're doing. Everybody, we're going to talk about the music, because this is more than the music. But the music, you can hear that too somewhere, right? On
Oh yeah, definitely.
yeah.
So I got a band called Mollywop. I just say this real quick: MOLLYWOP. They can check us out on all the streaming services. Yeah. But there's some other mollywops out there that's singing some foul music. That's not us. We mollywop. Yeah. Our album is called Stand Up. Check us out. We on Spotify, you know, Apple Music, iTunes. There it is.
We here for plugging, man. This is what we plug on this show. That's the deal. Yeah, we plugging. So hey, you do all those good things, mollywops. Check out this website. Eat healthier, my friends, that you watching me. And so with that, I'll say bye-bye. We out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.